At 6:15 p.m. on April 11th, in a quiet Istanbul neighborhood, a man in a pickup truck circles the block. He's not marking birthdays or anniversaries, he's marking the day his ex-wife's legal protection ends. One red circle, one deadline. And somewhere 500 meters away, Zeliha Çinibulak is walking home, unaware that someone is counting down her last safe hours. Serdar Harmank, her 42-year-old ex-husband, didn't have to break down doors or violate any orders. The restraining order that had protected 30-year-old Zeliha had expired just the day before. All he had to do was wait, and at 6:15 p.m. in Arnavutki district, he stopped waiting. If you knew someone was watching the calendar, waiting for the exact moment, you'd be vulnerable again. What would you do with your last 24 hours of safety? Because that's exactly what happened here. And the most terrifying part, the system helped him do it. Before we dive deeper into Zeliha's story, I need to ask you something. Have you ever felt trapped in a relationship? Or maybe someone you know has? Drop a heart in the comments if this story matters to you. And here is a question that has been haunting me. Should restraining orders come with expiration date reminders for the victims? Let me know what you think as we go through this together. Zeliha Çinibulak wasn't just another name in a police report. At 30 years old, she was a woman trying to rebuild her life in Istanbul. She had survived a marriage that had become a prison, and she was finally free, or so she thought. She had dreams that stretched far beyond the man who would ultimately destroy them. She believed in tomorrow. She believed in second chances. She believed that when she took that brave step to get a restraining order against Serdar Harmank, she was buying herself time to heal, to rebuild, to breathe again. She worked hard. She had people who cared about her. She had plans for a future where she wouldn't have to look over her shoulder every time she walked down the street in Arnavutki. But most importantly, she had hope. Hope that the legal system would protect her when she finally found the courage to ask for help. What she didn't know was that while she was using that time to heal, Serdar was using that same time to plan. Tell me in the comments, what gives you hope when everything feels impossible? The marriage between Zeliha and Serdar Harmank didn't start with violence. It never does. It started with someone who seemed to care more than anyone ever had. Serdar was 12 years older than Zeliha experienced, confident, seemingly protective. Someone who wanted to know where she was every moment, who she was with, what she was thinking. At first, it felt like love, intense, consuming, overwhelming love. But love doesn't isolate you from your friends. Love doesn't make you afraid to answer your phone. Love doesn't leave bruises that you have to explain away. The control crept in slowly, like water filling a room. First ankle deep, then waist deep, then suddenly you're drowning and you can't remember how you got there. Zeliha found herself walking on eggshells in her own marriage, checking in constantly, apologizing for things that weren't her fault, becoming smaller and smaller until she almost disappeared entirely. But here's what made her different. She didn't disappear. She fought back, and that's when Serdar became truly dangerous. Why do you think it's so hard for people to leave abusive relationships? Share your thoughts below. The day Zeliha walked into that courthouse to file for a restraining order was probably one of the scariest days of her life. Think about the courage that takes. You have to stand in front of strangers and detail your worst moments. You have to relive every threat, every bruise, every moment of terror. You have to admit that the person who claims to love you has become your greatest threat. But she did it. She filled out the paperwork with shaking hands. She told her story to a judge who had heard it all before. She provided evidence of the messages, the threats, the escalating violence. And it worked. The restraining order was granted. For the first time in months, maybe years, Zeliha could breathe. She could go to work without looking over her shoulder. She could sleep without jumping at every sound. She could start to remember who she was before fear became her constant companion. She started making plans again, small ones at first, maybe lunch with a friend she hadn't seen in months. Maybe a movie she'd wanted to watch. Maybe just a walk in the park without constantly checking her phone. She was healing. She was rebuilding. She was becoming herself again. But while she was learning to live without fear, he was learning to live with rage and patience and a calendar. Here's what I want to know. If you were supporting someone through this, what would you say to them? Leave your words of encouragement below. Here's something most people don't know about restraining orders. They expire. Just like a driver's license or a gym membership, legal protection has an end date. And just like those other things, the system assumes you'll remember to renew it. But here's the difference. If you forget to renew your gym membership, you can't work out. If you forget to renew your restraining order, you might not live to regret it. Zeliha's restraining order against Serdar Harmank was set to expire on April 10, 2025, a perfectly ordinary Thursday in what she hoped would be the start of her new, peaceful life. The system knew this date months in advance. The court knew. The police knew. Even Serdar knew, because his copy of the restraining order had the same expiration date printed clearly at the top. But somehow, in all of this knowing, no one thought to remind Zeliha that her protection was about to run out. So while she was busy living her life, building her confidence, planning her future, Serdar was doing something else entirely. He was waiting and counting down. One day. Just one day after her protection expired, he would make his move. This is the part that makes me furious. Should victims get automatic reminders when their protection is about to expire? Tell me what you think. Friday morning, April 11th, 2025 started like any other for Zeliha. Maybe she had coffee. Maybe she checked her phone. Maybe she looked out the window at the Istanbul skyline and noticed it was going to be a beautiful day. She had no idea that her legal protection had expired at midnight just 24 hours earlier. She had no idea that the invisible barrier that had kept Serdar away for months had simply disappeared. She had no idea that her 42-year-old ex-husband had been marking days off a calendar, waiting for this exact moment. At 6:15 p.m., as the evening light began to fade over Arnavutki district, Zeliha was walking near Istiklal Mahallesi in the Bagazki area. Just a normal Friday evening in her neighborhood. Then she saw the pickup truck. Serdar didn't have to break down her door. He didn't have to. He didn't violate any active orders. He couldn't. There weren't any to violate anymore. He simply showed up. And Zeliha, who had spent months feeling safe, who had started to believe that maybe, just maybe, her nightmare was over, discovered that it was just beginning again. The attack was brutal. 13 bullets. 13 times he pulled that trigger. This wasn't impulse. This wasn't passion. This wasn't a crime of emotion. This was calculated. This was planned. This was a man who understood the system well enough to game it. Zeliha was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, but the damage was too severe. The woman who had fought so hard to be free died from her injuries. I have to pause here because this is hard to talk about. How are you feeling right now? Are you angry? Because you should be. After Zeliha Çinibulak was murdered on that Friday evening in Istanbul, suddenly everyone had something to say. Police officials talked about unfortunate timing, court administrators mentioned procedural guidelines, social workers discussed the complexities of domestic violence cases. But nobody, not one single person in authority, could explain why a 30-year-old woman who had been brave enough to seek legal protection was warned when that protection was about to disappear. Zeliha's family was devastated, not just by her death, but by the realization that it didn't have to happen. That their daughter, their sister, their loved one had died not because the system failed her, but because the system stopped caring about her the moment her paperwork expired on April 10th. The community in Arnavutki rallied. Vigils were held, petitions were signed, people demanded change. But here's the thing about after. It's too late. All the vigils in the world couldn't bring Zeliha back. All the policy changes couldn't undo the fact that a preventable murder had been allowed to happen. Her family asked the hardest question of all. If the court can send us jury duty notices and tax reminders and parking ticket warnings, why couldn't they send her a simple text message saying her restraining order was about to expire? Nobody had a good answer, and Serdar Harmank. He knew exactly what he was doing when he waited until April 11th, exactly 24 hours after her protection ended. What would you say to Zeliha's family right now? Leave them a message below. Zeliha's story isn't unique. It's not even rare. Across the country, women die in the gaps between legal protections. In the days and weeks when orders are expiring, when paperwork is being processed, when the system treats their safety like a subscription service that they're responsible for maintaining. Sarah Martinez in Texas, dead 3 days after her order expired. Jennifer Thompson in Florida, killed while waiting for her renewal hearing. Maria Santos in California, murdered on the exact day her protection ended. These aren't isolated incidents. This is a pattern, a deadly, predictable pattern that we refuse to see because it's easier to blame victims for not being organized enough than to fix the system that's failing them. We have the technology to remind people about everything else in their lives. Your phone tells you when it's time to stand up, when to drink water, when your favorite show is about to start. But somehow, we can't figure out how to tell a woman that her legal protection is about to disappear and her life might be in danger. Tell me, what other things do you get automatic reminders for? List them in the comments. Now ask yourself why Zeliha didn't get one for the most important deadline of her life. I want you to imagine something for a moment, and I know it's going to be uncomfortable. Imagine you wake up tomorrow morning and check your phone, and there's a message waiting for you. Warning, your restraining order expires at midnight tonight. After that, the person who threatened to kill you will no longer be legally required to stay away from you. What would you do with those last 24 hours? Would you pack a bag? Would you call in sick to work? Would you stay with a friend? Would you leave town? Would you go to the police station and beg them to extend your protection? Would you hire a security guard? Would you buy a weapon? Or would you do what so many women are forced to do? Live in terror, constantly looking over your shoulder, waiting for the moment when your predator decides the coast is clear. This is the choice we're forcing on victims. We're asking them to be their own security system, their own early warning network, their own lifeline. And when they fail, when they can't be vigilant enough, organized enough, scared enough to keep themselves alive, we blame them for not doing better. This is the question that keeps me up at night. In your last 24 hours of legal protection, what would you do? Be honest in the comments. Let's be absolutely clear about what happened to Zeliha Çinibulak on April 11th, 2025. She didn't die because she made bad choices. She died because she made brave ones. She didn't die because she wasn't strong enough. She died because the system wasn't strong enough to protect her. She didn't die because Serdar Harmank was unpredictable. She died because he was patient. He didn't break the law. He waited for it to stop working. At 6:15 p.m. in Arnavutki, with 13 bullets, he ended the life of a 30-year-old woman who had done everything right, who had sought help, who had trusted the system to protect her. And the most heartbreaking part of all, Zeliha thought she was safe. She thought she had done everything right. She thought the legal system that she had trusted with her life would at least tell her when it was done protecting her. She died not because she didn't try, but because the system stopped trying the moment her restraining order expired on April 10th. We talk about warning signs all the time. Red flags, things to watch out for. But what about warning dates? What about the ticking clock that nobody talks about? What about the expiration date on your own safety? Zeliha Çinibulak deserved better. She deserved a system that protected her as carefully as it protected Serdar's right to know exactly when that protection would end. She deserved to live, rest in power. Zeliha, you didn't run out of time. The system ran out of care. If Zeliha's story has affected you, please share it. Her name deserves to be remembered, and her death demands change. And if you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, please reach out for help. You deserve protection that doesn't come with an expiration date. Don't let Zeliha's story end here. Subscribe to keep her memory alive and to stay informed about the changes that need to happen to prevent another tragedy like this. What changes do you think need to happen? Let's keep this conversation going in the comments below.